Hello everybody and good morning. It is Monday and welcome to the Top Producer Show. So our mission is to educate, equip, and train servant leaders. Our mission is to create financially independent achievers, and our mission and our vision is to help people grow. Goodness, can't keep all that straight today. And we are on a new book called The Unfair Advantage by Robert Kiyosaki. So before we jump into the introduction of this book, we want to invite some people on here. Hope everybody had a good weekend. There we go. All right.
Junior, what's happening? Hope things are going well. I see the silver business is going good. So today we're on The Unfair Advantage, The Power of Financial Education by Robert Kiyosaki. He wrote this book after the collapse. The last time, there's always a new one. This was 2008 collapse. I think he wrote this book. Was it 2011?
I think it was 2011. Let me double check.
So this is what schools never teach about money. He said this book is basically dedicated to those who want to step up and be part of the solution. And there definitely needs to be a solution out here, and he believes he has the answer. So the introduction, he says, as I write this, I encourage people to learn, study, practice, and possibly see the world differently. Governments basically print money. This is why the price of gold and silver go up and why savers are losers. So I write this because I would rather teach people to fish than give them a fish, which is a very different philosophy than a lot of what's going on. My rich dad said, choose your teachers wisely. So he tells a story about basically how to catch a monkey. And in Africa, and they do this in South America too, they'll actually tie a bottle to a tree, and inside the bottle has a fruit or nut or something that the monkey, lemur, they catch different things, can grab. And what will happen is the monkey will stick his hand through the bottle, grab it, and then forms a fist. And because the fist won't fit back through, the monkey will sit there until somebody comes and gets him, whether it's, for food or otherwise. And he says, unfortunately, people are a lot like this too. He said, humans are very similar in fashion, but rather than cling to a fruit or nut that they want to eat, humans try to cling to job security, their possessions, and money. Due to lack of financial education, most people will spend their entire lives as wage slaves of their employers and tax slaves to the government. So he said in 2007 and 8, when everything started to crash, people clung to jobs, people clung to their homes, people clung to spending or sending, trying to save and conserve. That's what most people were talking about. The stock market crashed and school enrollments went up. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Most people do not know what to do. And he was talking about overall. He's like, most people don't have a clue. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go. He says most people didn't even know how to change to benefit from what's going on. So you ended up with a crisis of decade. He said the problem in the coming decade, the years between 2010 and 2020, will prove to be the most volatile, world-changing decade in history, which we just lived through it, and we saw that happen. He goes, uneducated people will cling to job security, savings, home, retirement plan. The global financial storm is coming with certainty. And here's 5 reasons he said he absolutely positively knows it's going to crash again. Number 1, the end of the industrial age. The industrial age began around the 1500s after the Renaissance period, which was full of ideas and art, and it came after the Dark Ages, which was nothing but war and poverty and death and blah blah blah. In the 1500s, we started manufacturing things, and that manufacturing led to trade, and that trade led to wealth. So once people were like, wow, we can build and trade and get wealthy, that idea caught on real. That's called capitalism. That caught on pretty fast. And it basically ended around 2000. And he says around 2000 because he has some specific things. He goes, during the industrial age, countries basically with industrial tech, factories, great schools, and weapons basically ruled the world. The auto manufacturing, airline manufacturing, radio and TV and weapons dominated the business world. During this age, a worker could find a lifelong job and be protected by a labor union until he got a retirement, and he really had a retirement for life. Financial education was not as important in the industrial age. You just had to know how to fucking show up to work. That's basically what you had to do. And there were great paying jobs. Now, it's not that you didn't have to learn anything, but there was no real technical skill a lot of times. It was just show up and make sure that the manufacturing keeps going. The industrial age ended at when the information age began. Jobs became replaced by technology, which we've seen a ton of this lately, which is kind of awesome. The idea of a high-paying job ended. In today, 2000, this was 2011 that he wrote this. He said the U.S. is the largest debtor in the world. The information age, the age where job security and pension were life are guaranteed, will disappear altogether inside of the information age. He said inside the information age, that's gone. He said, unfortunately, like a monkey with its fist caught in the bottle, millions of workers are going to cling to the industrial age ideas, such as go to school, get a job, get a paycheck, get medical benefits, get retirement, get government support for life. That's what people are actually, and you can hear people whining and crying about this consistently. 2, so this is the second reason he knows it's going to collapse. The rules of money were changed in 1971. In 1971, President Nixon took the U.S. dollar off of the gold standard. What's really interesting is if you go back and look at JFK's assassination, JFK 2 weeks before he was assassinated said there is a secret society, there's a secret in the United States that I'm going to reveal. There's an evil coming that I'm going to reveal. And he was unwilling to sign to basically take money off of the gold standard. He was assassinated. And if you look back at Lincoln, there's another thing about money and who gets the money. And, the World Bank was trying to get into the United States at that point too. And Lincoln said, no, we're not going to do it. And he was assassinated. So was it really about money? It's a good question. I've got a friend who's writing a book based on, he said, if you look at almost all assassinations around the world of, high up political leaders, very, very few of them aren't tied to some kind of story like that. A lot of times it's money. So, 1971, the U.S. dollar became an instrument of debt. If you don't know anything about how banking works, banking is our banking system is built off of fractionalization. Fractionalization, in layman's terms, basically means debt creates money. For instance, if this cell phone was a document, let's just say a piece of paper, and you sign this document for $100,000 mortgage. Let's just say this is a document for $100,000 mortgage. You take it to the bank, and the bank would have you sign it, and then the bank could turn around and take that debt notice to the World Bank and say, look, I'm collecting $800 a month for the next 30 years. So fractionalization shows that they would actually give the bank, the World Bank would then extend credit to the bank for $900,000. It's about 9 times. Fractionalization is different all over the world, but in the United States, about 9 times. So they would get $900,000 for you signing a debt notice for $100,000. Now, FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance, blah, 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 says they have to keep $100,000 of that in the bank to cover whatever debt they really had. then guess what they get to do with the other 800? The other 800 they're able to extend out in the form of debt. Imagine that. They're able to give car notes and credit card notes and, you know, other mortgages off of that same debt notice. But if they get a mortgage or they get a car note or they get a credit card, what they do is they package that up, go back to the World Bank and borrow again. So it's all built off of fractionalization. It's all fake. So when people are like, oh my God, they took my money, I was like, well, not really, because it's fake to begin with. So after 1971, savers became losers. Now, why would that happen? Because if you're saving something that's going down in value, you're losing. Even though you have more of it. It's like accumulating, if you piled up cat poo in your closet, the more of it you have doesn't mean you're making more, meaning more money, unless you can sell it somehow. Since 1971, the U.S. dollar has lost 95% of its purchasing power. And he goes on to say, imagine what's going to happen. He goes, do you honestly think it's going to take another 40 years to lose the last 5%? No, it only took the pandemic. Since the banks can print money, why can't you? And he says, if you follow along in this book, I will show you physically how to print money. Not like the kind of money that, but money in the form of ideas. So you will find out how you can in this book, but financial education is what it takes. So then the third reason that he knows it's going to fall apart is he said after 1971, bank bailouts increased. Subprime mess basically fueled this last one. He says many are angry that the banks basically bailed out the rich. And if you don't know about, just go look at all the that they bailed out and all the people they bailed out. It was all the rich friends. It was all the people they hung out with, that were contributing to the political parties and blah, 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 blah. So the bank owners passed a bill on to taxpayers. So we got to pay for all their fuck-ups. In the 80s, it was millions. In the 90s, it was billions. In the 2000s, it's trillions. Because it became worldwide instead of, country-specific. Most people without sound financial education think debt is bad. And it's if you don't know how to use debt to make you richer, you really are poor mentally. In this book, you'll find out how debt makes bankers and financially educated rich. You have to learn how that works. Doesn't mean you have to do it. You have to learn how that works so that way you can take advantage of it too. So, the fourth reason is because if we're printing money, inflation is inevitable. So he says inflation is rising. The price of gold in January of 2000 was $262. In December 20th, 2010, 1 ounce of gold was $1,400. That's a good increase. The price of oil was $25 a barrel in January 4th, 2000. He said the price of oil in December 20th, 2010, which is obviously when he wrote this, a barrel was $91. A smart person would ask the following questions. What the fuck is going on? No. They would ask, what is an ounce of gold going to be worth in 2020? And if you don't know, it went to over $2,000. I think it got to $2,100 or $2,200 an ounce. From 200, that's a 100% gain. That's pretty nice. Also, how much is it? No, it's a 10 times. It's a 10 times percent, so it's 100. Yeah. How much will a gallon of gas cost? Well, we know that was going down until just recently. We canceled a couple energy things, and now we're going to buy from overseas again. And your gas prices are going to go up a lot because they've gone up everywhere else in the world. I've got friends, around, with the exception of the Middle East, where they actually pull it from the ground. What will food cost? Again, we were trying to bring stuff back, but now we're going to funnel all that overseas. I can't remember the percentage of I know pharmaceutical drugs is like 95% are made overseas, specifically in China. And they control basically the entire drug market, which would be a problem, right? If there was a pandemic or something, if they controlled every single medication that was coming in, they could kind of set the price on that. There are questions. These questions, monkeys and Americans don't know how to ask. And he's referring to, of course, the story at the beginning. He said, in this book, you will learn how to predict the future and how to reduce your risk from the changes that are coming. So here's the fifth reason. The fifth reason, he said, it's going to create more poor people. When you print fake money and inflation takes off, the dumb people, and what I mean by dumb people is the people who are not financially educated, there's going to create more poverty. And he's like, not just a little bit either. The gap between the rich and the poor will increase greatly. Remember, he wrote this in 2010. Go look at what the richest people in the world earned just in the last year. I think it was something like 156 billion, if I remember right, were the top 5 people, and they were talking about Amazon, Tesla, Gates, Warren Buffett, billionaire. And when I say billionaire, there's people who just scratch the surface of a billion, and then there's people that have 100 billion. I'm sorry, it's 100 billion. The gap between the rich and the poor will increase greatly. Many in middle America will disappear, is basically what he said. More poor people. There will be more poor people living in rich countries in the world. So he's like, United States, Japan, places modern world is just going to create more poverty overall. He said right now, and this was 2010, there were 79 million baby boomers. 52% did not have enough money to retire. 52%, so half. What is that, like 40? Yeah, that's about 40 million people didn't have the money to retire. So most jobs will be lost. He said the national, state, city, and local governments are all short of money, and many of them are going bankrupt. The entire state of California, bankrupt, which is also, if you look at the most bankrupt places, they're also the ones that are shutting everything else down. They're the ones, Michigan, complete shutdown. New York, complete shutdown. California, complete shutdown. Go look at all their retirement plans. All the retirement plans are bankrupt. Mm-hmm. Where do you think they're going to get the money from if they shut everything down and ask for emergency funding? So it had nothing to do maybe with what was really going on or what they were telling you was going on. It also is a way to go back in. You drive out all of the business owners and you go buy up all the real estate extremely cheap. It's actually what the mafia does, or did. I think they still do it. But the mafia did in certain places like the East Coast, Las Vegas. They come in and bought everything up. They drove everybody out through violence and then bought up all the real estate at a discount. Not a bad plan. The mafia just has a different name now. More jobs are lost. From 2007 to 2010, most jobs losses were in the private sector, meaning big corporations and small businesses. The next job losses are going to come from the public sector, which is millions of government jobs, which is, we're going to see happen. This means higher taxes, fewer services, and more unemployment. Sounds like right now. In January 2011, Camden, New Jersey was the second most dangerous place in the United States. Guess what they did? They cut the police force by 50% and reduced the number of firefighters and government workers. Go look up how that's worked out for Camden. You've got a 10-year history now to look at. In 2010, the U.S. debt was $14 trillion. By the way, we're a little over that now. And the total the U.S. owed in unpaid obligations was over $100 trillion. The U.S. is completely bankrupt. Completely. So basically we have 3 options, is what Kiyosaki said. Number 1, you can default and declare bankruptcy. Number 2, you can cut spending and increase taxes and pay bills. Number 3, you can print more fake money, kill the dollar, and pay with basically devalued money, crushing the world's economy and creating ultimate poverty for everybody, which is what they're doing. In 1972, Nixon basically opened the door to China. So isn't it funny that they took money off of the gold standard and then instantly shipped everything overseas to be made? Because now the money's not worth anything. It's a good way to crush the economy. China was a very poor country at that point, but was in position to grow to be the next superpower. By the way, we helped set them up. For those of you who don't know anything about history, go look up 1959 when we helped set up China. The most exciting decade in history is going to be between 2010 and 2020, which we just lived through. The next 10 years will end the American Empire. I thought that was really interesting. So he said this in 2011. He was writing it in 2010. He said the dollar will prove to be a complete fraud and fall apart. The world economy will basically emerge. And most people are going to be trapped going back to school. Sounds very familiar. The key to the new world is basically education, but not the education you think. The current school system is basically still teaching the industrial age version of school, which is why if you talked with the average American, they're dumb as shit, you know? And I talk to people who are overseas, and I'm like, why do you get it so much better? A lot of it's programming. The information age, a person's education and lifelong learning is more important than ever now, Kiyosaki. Going to school by itself will not prepare you for a global market. In fact, it's going to probably set you back. The industrial age, you only needed really two things. You needed academic, which is the ability to read, write, basic math problem solving. And then you needed basically some kind of professional education. You needed some skill set. The information age, you're actually going to need three things. You're going to still need a little bit of the academic. You're going to need a professional skill, but you're also going to need financial education to know what to do with the money if you expect to survive. If you expect to survive. Just, unfortunately, most people aren't going to survive this. And I don't mean just like physically survive. I mean financially survive. Question: why is financial education not taught in school? His answer is basically to trap humans and train monkeys or employees in school and teach them how to trap them and slave them. A person with a solid financial education will not cling to job security, paychecks, pensions. Known tax laws that you can avoid or pay nothing or pay less if you understand how they work. People will also mindlessly turn power and money over to Wall Street, financial planners, real estate agents, with the hope that they're going to save them and create a retirement for them. They're not, by the way. They're not. Go read go read Tony Robbins' book, Money Master the Game. Education is a process. Everything worthwhile takes time. That was John Maxwell. Education is very important. One of the unfair advantages is to know the difference between the different types of education. Education is a process. To become something takes time. Takes time. And he kind of tells a story about the different places he was. And, you know, he's like, in 71, I got out of the military. And then, you know, I had to go get some formal education. Then I worked for Xerox. And he worked at a lot of different places to gain knowledge. And he went to Xerox because Xerox at the time had the best sales training anywhere. I mean, you're trying to sell a couple $100,000 worth of copiers to a company. Number one, education is a process. Go to school. Most people are just going to school to get a job. He goes, monkeys never question sticking their hand in the bottle. Most people never question, why the fuck am I going to school? Why am I going into this much debt? Because they don't have any idea. Why am I going to this much debt that you can't erase, you can't file bankruptcy on, you can't get out of, to go get it? I mean, I want to punch some people in the face when they're like, well, you know, I need an education. I'm like, cool, what are you doing? Well, I'm spending $50,000 to get an accounting job that pays $30,000. I'm like, you're fucking stupid and you don't even understand the profession you're in. Like, that doesn't work out in any chart. But it's okay. I actually had a kid in a meeting talk to me about, well, I can't earn more money right now. I was like, well, why can't you earn more money? Because I'm getting government student loans, and if I earn too much money, they'll take away the government student loans.
Oh boy.
And I was like, well, how much is that? And we had a whiteboard in front of us, so I wrote it down, and I was like, so if you make this much, so what kind of money, if you go over, and I think it was over like $1,500 a month. I said, so if I help you make $3,000, they're going to take away your student loan, and you're going to fall apart. I said, you dumbass, you can now pay for your student loans, and you have more money left over. I said, by the way, what are you going to school for? God, I hope it's not accounting. He's like, finance and accounting. I'm like, I can see that education is doing you well. Is the only way to make money to be an employee? And the answer is no. There are actually four choices. There are four choices. Hold on. Spelling is key. Choices in education. So you have the employee, the self-employed, the business owner, and the investor. Top students from medical school and law schools that go get jobs, because a lot of times a doctor and or a lawyer will not actually go open their own business. They'll go work for a conglomerate, and they actually pay the most in taxes, because when you're a W-2 employee, you actually pay the most in taxes. If you look at percentage-wise, if you look at the most taxes that are paid, they're paid by the people who got talked into basically signing up for taxes, because, you know, there were no taxes coming out of anybody's check before the 40s, I think. And then they talked him into it. After World War II, FDR kind of ran this campaign. I think he talks about that here. So you can choose between traditional or non-traditional education. Rich Dad, and Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, did not value a high-paying job. He didn't value a high-paying job. He says, look, there's different ways to earn. You can use debt as an investment. You can develop a skill or sales, and sales always equals income. By the way, 80% of all the money that comes into a facility comes through sales. 80% of all the money. The rest of the people who have jobs there are just basically managing what comes in the door. But 20% of most organizations are a sales force. Sometimes it's as low as 5 or 10% of an organization is a sales force, but the sales force brings in over 80% of the money. Some of the money is brought in venture capital, which isn't necessarily sales from the sales force, it's sales from the CEO. So develop sales skills, reduce taxes is another way. That's how you can get ahead. Continue to take non-traditional education classes is what he did. He said a strong financial education teaches 3 types of income. So these are the several types of income you want. Number 1, earned income, time for money. A high-paid skill. A high-paid skill. I've heard this from Kiyosaki. I've heard this from Dan Luck. I've heard this from many people. Basically, you want to find a skill that pays over 6 figures. You want to find a skill that pays over 6 figures. So you're looking at the $50 to $100 an hour range or more. $50 to $100 an hour range or more. He basically comes out and says, I don't care if you fucking like what you're doing. We live in an economic world. If you like eating and you like living indoors and you like retirement and you don't want to live in the street, it doesn't matter what you like. It matters what pays, for the lifestyle. And by the way, you spend almost as much time at home sleeping and doing things as you do at work, sometimes more. There's 168 hours in a week. Look at the majority of the time you spend at work versus home. If you're spending more time at home, doesn't it make sense to make as much as possible when you have to be at work? Mm-hmm. Because nobody really likes everything about any work, by the way. People are like, I'm just looking for something that I love. I just want to find something that I love. And I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, people don't love everything about anything, And the 4 or 5 people in the world who say they do, clinically are usually insane. And there's a lot of insane people who are wealthy, right? And if you don't know that, just look at psychosis. You can read about psychology and you can see it. Mm-hmm. These are the people who slept in their office. These are the people that didn't talk to people. These are antisocial. These are the people that don't get along with people in a room. There's a lot of those out there.
Mm-hmm. And actually, Grant Cardone talked about that in one of the books that we went over. I think it was 10X. Like, at some point when you want to be a top producer and you're trying to get to a goal, you have to have this moment of insanity and obsession in order to get yourself where you want to go.
Yep. So the difference between monkey and humans, other than the tail and some of the hair, mm-hmm. Laws of physics says 2 objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Obviously, you can't park 2 cars in the same spot at the exact same time unless they're on top of each other and then they're not in the exact same space. So he said ideas are also like this. So what are the ideas that you've been taught? He goes, there's been some destructive, old, bullshit ideas that we've all been taught, and they're programmed. They're programmed in. And they've been programmed in for a long time. In fact, grandparents told this to parents, who told this to kids, who tell this to grandkids. And I've heard most of these, and I heard most of these growing up. It was, and they're really lies that are told to keep people where they're at. Now, where did the lies originate from? My guess is from the people who didn't want you to figure it out. Number 1, you'll never be rich. Oh, I'll never be rich. And everybody has a reason why they'll never be rich, right? Well, I'll never be rich. I'm not greedy. I'll never be rich. I don't have this. I'll never be rich. Everybody has their excuse of why they won't be rich. Too bad they don't have a reason. The rich are just greedy. That's another thing that, lie that people are programmed in. I would rather be happy than rich. I'm like, you're fucking miserable all the time. You're always crying about why you don't have money and why you can't do this and why you can't do that. That's happiness to you? No, that's stupidity. That's what you're doing is you're lying to yourself to keep you where, mildly happy. That's not going to work out. You got to work hard. Oh my gosh, taxes are so unfair. Taxes are unfair. You have to work hard if you want to make it anywhere. And I'm not willing to work that hard. Investing is risky, and the job you're at that can be eliminated at any point is not, right? The key to success has to be a good education. I just haven't gotten any school. I don't have any education. One reason why so many students leave school and are unable to find a job is they've been trained to be an employee. They lack real life skills to become successful in anything and or an entrepreneur. So, if you think that way, then you will. Mindset above skill set. Number 8, I need job security. Oh my gosh, I just can't do this without a job. And, I'm not against having a job to pay your bills while you build something on the outside. I think it's actually a smart idea. It's more relatable to most people. Most people don't relate to the person if you're 100% self-employed, that's the reason you're having so much problem recruiting great people. Because great people that could come on board and really influence usually are participating in what the world's doing. That's why they're influential. But when you go 100% self-employed and you're not working a job and you're getting up at whatever hour you're getting up and you don't relate to most people, it becomes much, 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 much harder to recruit good people into your company or onto your team. So the need for job security. I need to invest for the long term in a well-diversified portfolio, stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. Robert Kiyosaki said that is absolutely the worst advice of all. He goes, if you look at the Dow in 2000, it was 11,357. If you look at the Dow in 2010 on the exact same date, it was 11,577. He goes, if you compare that to what oil did, if you compare that to what gold did, they, physical beat paper, basically. 10. I didn't do well in school. How can I possibly be rich? I didn't even take a business class. Some of the richest people in the world didn't even go to school. Some of them didn't even graduate. Now, with that being said, people are like, Bill Gates never. I was like, Bill Gates was a fucking genius. He had his IQ of over 150. You can barely tie your shoes and get out the door on time in the morning. So let's stop with the, Bill Gates didn't go to school. Your ass needs an education because you can barely function. So go get an education. Make sure you can actually pay your bills first. Then we'll talk about building a business and being crazy and doing all this other stuff. But right now you need to be a productive member of society. You need the money to buy soap, right? And hairspray and whatever else you need. And quit borrowing everybody else's shit. Mm-hmm. Some of the richest people in the world didn't go to school, which is true. So people always try to use that with me, especially the ones that are completely self-employed and they're struggling and they don't know why. They're like, yeah, but, which is true. Yes, some of the people did. I was like, but those people were geniuses. Are you a genius? Let's look around your house and figure this out. Let's look at your bank account. You're not a genius in a lot of those areas, and that's okay. You can become rich by doing the right things. And the first thing is to be able to support yourself. That makes you attractive to everybody else. If you're always looking for money, if you're always broke, if you're always struggling, then people don't want to be around you, which is who you want around you, right? The people you want to be around you don't want to be around you because you're struggling. And it's harder to recruit. Mm-hmm. I learned all this the hard way, by the way, because I was one of those people growing, because I heard this from certain people. They were like, oh, jobs suck, and jobs suck. Yes, but go get the best one you can and help it fund your business. And then you become more relatable to people. So, some rich is not the world, okay. Consumer Reports advice. So this was Consumer Reports advice. This was from 2010. It says, live modestly, have a budget with a 401k, save, pay off debt, work longer. Robert Kiyosaki said, not only is that probably the worst advice he's ever heard, he said, but it's also kind of depressing. He's like, no wonder people don't want to go do that. So he said, it's time to let go of the old programming. He said, lessons from Sunday school. He goes, I'm not like a preacher. I don't try to force people into anything. He goes, but there's two things that I did learn. He said, blessed are the meek, they shall inherit the work. And the meek meaning not poverty, not meek meaning like peasant, but meek meaning humble. The humble will basically inherit. The people who are givers, who are philanthropists. He said, the second thing he learned is, my people perish from lack of knowledge. My people perish from, whether it's knowledge to know how to fight, knowledge to know how to finance, knowledge to know how to protect yourself and your faith. if you're missing that knowledge and the ability to communicate with somebody effectively, it's not just yell at somebody, which we see a lot on Facebook and all these other things, but to be extremely, and I want to use the word, it's kind of a negative word, but be extremely persuasive, extremely manipulative. If you learn some of these psychology things, you can get anybody to do anything you want to do. You just have to know how it works. And the best people in the world will manipulate a situation and get what they want and make sure everybody else wins at the same time. That's key to that thing. Manipulation is not good or bad, it's just what it's used for. Typically we hear about it being used for the wrong reason, but sometimes you can manipulate a situation and it's good for everybody. But you have to have that type of thinking to begin with, which is what we're talking about here. So, if we don't teach people about money, we're going to have a lot more people poor, we're going to have a lot more people suffering. It's basically, he said, it's time to set people free with financial education that can do that. And this book is particularly about real money, actual money, creating wealth. So, very cool book. When I read this, I think I've read it 4 or 5 times. There's a section in here that basically was the light bulb for me, which I'll highlight. But every day we're going to go through a chapter of this, and this was just the introduction. We haven't even gotten into the book yet. This was just the preset. So, what you got?
I think that's it. So, and a lot of us had this education, and when I first read his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that was what I read straight, not straight out of high school, but like after my first year of college. It was one of the books that was given to me that when I started going into business, it was something that I first read. And understanding the different types of education, and I always wondered why I did not really fit in where I was from. Because I start questioning a lot of things, and I'm like, why are we doing that? Why are we doing things this way? And why aren't we trying things this way? And unfortunately, because of where I was at, I grew up in a town that only had 40 people in it. So I had questions and nobody had answers for me, which was extremely frustrating. So as we were being told, you need to go to school, get good grades, so that way you could go off to college to get a job, I was like, okay, but with what you're teaching me in school right now, that doesn't make any sense, because where are we using this in a career later? A lot of it didn't make sense to me. And then of course, when I had the questions to teachers that were around me, everybody just looked at me like I was weird. And I was like, I'm like, is there something wrong with me? Like, everybody keeps almost treating me like there's something wrong with me. But it turns out it was just everybody else, which made me so happy. But the go to school, get good grades, to go get a job, I was just like, okay, what is it that I really want to go do? Because I started looking at all the other people around me as I was growing up, and what I realized is that there wasn't a single person in my hometown whose life that I want. And Jeff brought up that everybody always talks about doing something that they love. They want to do something that they would love to do every day. And I came to the conclusion early that I'm like, you know what? I'd rather go to work and do something I hate than not have enough money to be able to support myself. Because I knew a lot of people around me that did something that they said that they loved. But what they would end up doing is that after work, they would come home and complain about their job that they supposedly loved, and would complain that they don't make enough money, and they ended up miserable anyway. I'm like, well, I'd rather be miserable at work for like 8 hours a day and be able to come home and then do whatever the heck I want, go on the trips, be able to do things that I wanted to do and not have to worry about it. So that was something that I realized very early. And all I can say about that is, thank God I left. Sometimes you have to get out of the environment that you're in to be able to grow. Because I love going back to my hometown and I love spending time with my family back at home, but they don't understand a lot of these things. So whenever you're making the decision of, I want to make changes and I need to get myself into a better place, sometimes you have to physically remove yourself from a location into a different place where you're surrounding yourself with a different group of people. Because it's good to go back every once in a while, because my family's there and I like to go see everybody, and there's certain things I do love about small towns, but there's also things I really don't like. And I can only handle about a week of it. And then I come back and then I'm like, okay, now I need to work. So that is what we have for you guys today. And it was a long introduction, but this is going to be a really good book. I've actually have not gone through this one yet. So this is all new to me. I've heard a lot of this stuff because I do listen to him on YouTube quite often. I listen to a lot of his keynote speaking. So this is going to be a great book. So with that, that is what we have for you guys today. And we will see you guys tomorrow.